Welcome to another episode of Philosophical Tools. Today we're going to look at and talk about Slit-Scan processes and how to build them in TouchDesigner. We're going to start with some early examples with Slit-Scan photography. The first is 1913 Jacques Henry Latry. Probably said that wrong. But he noticed that if fast-moving subject matters would be moving past his camera with a slow vertical shutter, there would start to be some bending and warping of time in the image. I did find at least these first three from an amazing collection of Slit-Scan works outlined by Golan Levin. I'll include the link in the description, and you can see a wide range of historical slit scans. I just picked out three and then some other examples from the 1970s. Next is one of the not necessarily first, but a widely published Slit-Scan photograph in Life magazine, 1961. There's William Larson, Figure in Motion series, 1967 and 1970, which is at the George Eastman House in Rochester, New York, which is a moving figure across the slit that creates these bodily landscapes. Next two pieces I'd like to spend a little bit more talking about. This is a piece by Ralph Hawking and performer Sherry Hawking, and the piece is called Slow Scan from 1980, which uses a fax machine and a video camera to view a document or photograph that's solely recorded onto an erasable disk. And so this process Sherry could see in real time and react to how the scan of the image and the form was working. And so we get to see a scan and then a performance or a reshifting of gestures in relationship to what's happening. So let's take a closer look. Next up is a piece called Warp in early or 2000s by Stana Veselka and software written by Tom DeMeyer. And what I really love about Stana is her willingness to play and her attention to detail, or attention to the process. And so you can see that she's really understood the process and is moving through the screen or the space, knowing what's going to happen with the slit scan process. And there's a series of experiments throughout the piece that show different elements of the slit scan. Let's take a look. I want to quickly show, in addition to some works, is a diagram I found on an article Paul Bourke wrote in August 2014 on Slit-Scan images. And I really like what he wrote here. There are a number of methods by which time and space can be encoded into a single image. Historically, one method of achieving this was a multiple exposures, multiple time points overlaid into one image and facilitated by current digital technology, where images can be variably added together without constraints of film. And Paul has a diagram on this article, and I'm going to include the link so you can check it out yourself. But I think this gives us a kind of a picture of where we need to go when we're building the Slit-Scan process. So I'm going to show you two different processes. One, I'm going to grab my web camera, which is, if you haven't already, you hit tab, top, and you can type up here video device in. I already have that. It's for purposes of this demo, so this is just a null web camera. So in Touch, this creating a Slit-Scan process can be really easy, and then I'll show some more complicated parts. So to get started, let's do Texture 3D, and we'll put this video, my video, into it. Now what Texture 3D does is essentially it's a cache. It's saving frames. And we're going to use those cache to do something like this. Frame 1, frame 2, frame 4, in amount of frames, and using a slit to go across them. Now, Touch has a built-in time machine, which we'll use. So tabbed to go to your tops, time machine. We'll feed in the Texture 3D into the top. And then you need some kind of time displacement map. And I'm going to describe what that is, but let's go to ramp to kind of demonstrate what that is. I'm going to feed this video into this side of it just to resize it for us in its dimension so it matches the resolutions of the incoming video. So I'm going to pass this here, and then we should instantly see a Slit-Scan process. Now the ramp, what it's doing is the gradient, whatever is in white is the most present, and the dark is the last frame, right? And we can come back up here to Text 3D and add more to the cache size. Now this is the only time, if you're thinking about this as a real-time process, is when this cache loads or when you change the cache size, because then it has to reload. So there's quite a few me's, 128. And you can hit this target if you don't want to process that window, but you should notice here that it's a little bit smoother, right? There's still some jagged edges. Now you can play a lot with how this ramp functions. Right now it's going horizontally, but you can go vertically. So time displaces vertically. You can go into a circle, right? You can also radial in here. It's kind of funky, but if you play with phase, that could be an interesting way of breaking up time. Or if you play with the period, you can have smaller gradient sections for the time displacement map. What's also kind of fun in this is you can use a different source or a different video or even the same video as the time displacement map. So now I'm displacing myself. Or if I wanted to get another video, so let's do movie file in. And let's not use the banana, but let's go grab something here. And so movie file in, and you can grab a video, and that can also be the time displacement map. So you can have another video displacing um, another video. So two videos, one video displacing another. And so let's just disconnect that for now and reconnect our ramp. And let's get back to a regular ramp. There we go. So one thing to also consider here is you can smooth things out or mix these kind of things, which you can have something something like, let's use a monochrome to make our video camera signal black and white, and let's composite these two together. And so then you can have an image displaced, but you can also have directionality, because what this ramp does is saying that the slit is going from top to bottom, or from right to left. And here we go. So it creates some directionality, and it actually smooths out the Slit-Scan process. So let's leave this up here. And let's just bring down our web camera. Now, if we're thinking about trying to set up a slit, we can do this one of two ways. We can grab something like, let's say, rectangle. And with rectangle, let's go and make the resolution 1920 by 1080. And come back to rectangle on its size, on its X. Let's just make it a slit, or something close to a slit, and make it a little bigger, and I'm going to center it off to the left. Okay. Now, if we're thinking about some of the processes that are happening up here or even here, generally the image is moving over that slit. So let's grab a transform. And the idea is then to move this image continuously to the right, or up and down, right? So let's grab a speed shop. So speed. And what we're going to use this for, and constant, is some kind of timing mechanism or moving mechanism for the parameter. So let's just say it's a smaller movement. And the decimal point, say 0.15. And let's limit type, let's loop. And so it's going to, right now it's going to loop between 1 and 0. For those who might not have used TouchDesigner, let's hit the bottom plus, which is view active. And this allows you to move the parameter and apply it to the translation of the X and transform. So we're going to click and drag in here and move, and you should see the arrow with the plus, and drag and drop and release on translate X. So I'm going to say chop reference, and then we should see the image move off to the right. Great, and it should loop. Now, ideally, if I'm looping off all the way to the right, I don't want it to pop in quite like that. So we can revisit the loop, and let's just say -1 to 1. So it should go off screen right and enter screen. There we go. That worked pretty good. So let's combine these to actually transform. Let's go to tile and say mirror or repeat. And so we have a constantly scrolling me. And then let's composite these two. And so let's go back to tops and go to composite. And so we'll add these two together. Now if we look closely, we should see the slit has me moving here. And actually it's making me want to move that rectangle ever so slightly over to the left so we don't have a gap on the left. There we go. And once we have this, there's quite a few ways we can do this. I'm going to come back and show you another way. But let's actually create a very similar feedback network to what we were using for the frame buffer. We'll go from, so we have rectangle and transform, we'll go into a comp, we have our slit, and we're going into a feedback. So we'll need an over, so we'll grab over, and let's see. Let's actually put feedback down here and this comp down here. So we have the feedback situation, and let's add transform, and then let's add, let's see, actually that's all we need. Let's just do a switch and constant. So this is very, very similar to what we did for the frame buffer. And let's go to common and make 1920 by 1080. It's the resolution of my webcam. And switch between those two. And then we'll use switch to be the target top of the feedback. Now all we really need to do then is translate the X ever so slightly. And if we want to slow that down, right, we can translate the X just to be a little bit slower, right? Slower it goes. And so that actually looks fairly close to William Larson's photograph, right? Or Stana's warp piece. So there's one method. And what's kind of awesome here, if we think about this being a feedback network, and it's really just feedback, directional feedback that's pushing that slit across the frame. And that's allowing it to kind of store it, right, as it pushes it across. And thinking about a fun thing here, if we're thinking about the frame buffer, right, all we would need to add in here is a cache. And so we can mix the two. Cache. Okay. So if we add a cache into this, and let's say move the output index to negative, and let's just do a smaller number, like a 6, smaller cache size. And it starts acting quite a bit, quite peculiar, as if you add this frame buffer in with this. Now that's going to change dramatically if we start doing other things with this video. Actually, let's see. Let's do 5. Okay. Let's actually come back to that. Let's just pretend I didn't do it and edit it out. All right. So the other way we would do a slit scan is, instead of moving the image over the slit, we can move the slit over the image. So let's grab another rectangle, or just copy this rectangle, and let's copy the speed. Nope. And let's go and make its center X. Do a loop as well. And I think this -1 might be a little bit too much for it. So let's do -0.5 to 0.5. And that might get us closer to what we need to do. If we speed up, this is something actually that can be useful up above as well, is if we speed up the constant, it'll speed up that looping mechanism and speed. So actually, that looks pretty good. So negative 0.5 to 0.5. Okay, so we have this rectangle, and then essentially we just need to composite the video image, and that could be the web camera, that could be another source, and we need something like that, right? Great, and we can always go back to constant and turn that down as well. Now if we use this in the feedback system, let's see how different it is. So right now it looks pretty close to that, and instead of let's take this into the feedback system. And actually, let's turn off the transform. Okay, so it's acting a little bit differently, right? Because essentially I'm releasing information in the slit, and I could kind of follow it, and that's actually something somewhat closer to what was happening with Ralph Hawkins' piece. Now we have these two different ways of playing with slits and slit scans. I thought it might be interesting if we mix the elements we were working with the frame buffer. So to add a frame buffer in here, in the feedback system, we would just want to add a cache. There we go. Cache. And let's do a negative output index. And let's just give it something like 6. And that starts acting quite a bit differently with a slit scan and a frame buffer. Let's play with that just for a sec. So let's try something like 2 frames. Or 3. See what that looks like. 4. And let's put on the transform again. And perhaps add something with the transform, like going up, which could be interesting if we perhaps tile it. Sure, that works. If we add more of the cache size, I should break up the image a little more. And that concludes philosophical tools. Play with these systems, see if you can figure out other ways of using a slit, an animated slit across images. And don't forget about the very simplistic way of using a slit scan as well, because these things can be used together as well to create a hybrid of a lot of different things. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.